Lu Huai brought back a woman from outside the base. She was dressed in clean clothes, and seemed out of place in this apocalyptic world. Her glistening little face was adorned with 2 charming dimples. This little girl was named Ruan Yin, following Lu Huai timidly. Her soft, jet black hair was casually spread over her shoulders, just like the delicate pink peony I had seen before the apocalypse. In this apocalypse, the powerful were common, yet beauties were extremely rare. Everyone said that no wonder Lu Huai had fallen in love with her. When Lu Huai led Ruan Yin out of the vehicle, the group including Lu Yu dared not look at my expression. At that time, the pungent smell of zombie blood still lingered on me. The zombie brain matter on my face was slowly sliding down my cheek. I was carrying a large hemp bag, filled with the supplies I had just collected. Compared with the spotless Ruan Yin, I looked exactly like a female beggar, who had crawled out of the garbage dump. I looked at Lu Huai and Ruan Yin behind him, raised my eyebrows and asked, "Who is she?" Lu Huai's voice was as cold as ice, saying, "It's none of your business." Hearing this, my heart couldn't help but feel a twinge of sadness. I slightly tightened my hand holding the sack and then said, "I'm your fiancé, how can it be none of my business?" Hearing this, Lu Huai subconsciously glanced at the little girl behind him. Then he sternly rebuked, "Jingjia." I looked at him with full of resentment, and my eyes felt slightly sour. I definitely wouldn't shed tears in front of him, so I could only look up at the sky. Today, the sky was gloomy since the arrival of the apocalypse. The sun had never shown up again. My eyes met Ruan Yin as she tilted her head and gave me a smile. Lu Huai was my fiancé, and our marriage had been decided long before the apocalypse. Lu Huai and I grew up in the military compound and attended the same kindergarten since childhood. When we grew up, we entered the same junior and senior high schools. When the apocalypse came, zombies wantonly destroyed houses, and the city instantly turned into ruins. Lu Huai awakened a powerful lightning-type ability, while Lu Yu awakened a water-type ability. The goal of our group was to go to Kyoto and seek refuge in the southern base. I wanted to find my grandfather, and then marry Lu Huai. I had been infatuated with him since childhood. Before the apocalypse, we were a perfect couple. After the apocalypse, we were teammates fighting side by side. Perhaps his ambition was far beyond that. In the first year of the apocalypse, Lu Huai led everyone to establish the Sunshine Base. With his outstanding ability, the base was growing larger and larger. I watched them enter the base, and gently poked Lu Yu's arm beside me. I asked, "Who is more beautiful, her or me?" Lu Yu's voice was hoarse with the unique timbre of a teenager. His face turned slightly red, and he whispered, "You are beautiful." I thought he was flattering me and didn't take his words to heart. In the evening, the warning line was set up, and the siren sounded from above the base. I stood up and looked out through the window. I saw countless zombies surging towards the Sunshine Base like a tide. I opened the door and found a small cake on the ground. My eyes lit up immediately. Under the small cake, I found that small note. The note clearly read, "Don't be angry," and the signature was Lu. I carefully put away the note and swallowed the small cake in one bite. I turned around and happened to meet Lu Huai's gaze. He seemed to have just gone out, wearing a white short-sleeved shirt, and the muscle lines on his arms were firm and powerful. I smiled at him, with the cake in my mouth, and my words were a bit slurred. "Lu Huai, the small cake is really delicious." A flash of disgust passed through Lu Huai's eyes. He looked at me indifferently and said, "Jingjia, now it's the apocalypse. It's not the time for you to be delicate." The small cake in my mouth suddenly lost its taste. Looking at him, before I could respond, rapid footsteps came from behind. Lu Yu's voice sounded. He stood beside me, and the chest of the young man was heaving rapidly. He looked down at my puffed up cheeks, and a smile filled his eyes. Then he looked at Lu Huai and whispered, "A large number of zombies are attacking the base. This is already the 3rd wave this month." Lu Huai's expression was indifferent, and his disgust for Lu Yu was almost undisguised. I suddenly remembered that Lu Huai had once said that he was afraid that Lu Yu would take away what belonged to him. So I also didn't like Lu Yu, because in my memory, this was the person that Lu Huai had clearly expressed his disgust for. Lu Yu was the son of Lu Huai's father, and another woman. Lu Huai had lived with his grandfather since childhood. After his father passed away, Grandpa Lu brought Lu Yu back from the outside. In the eyes of those of us who grew up together, we always looked at Lu Yu with dislike. Until after the apocalypse, everyone didn't have so much thought to tangle with these complicated matters, and our relationship gradually became harmonious. But I still couldn't like him. Yet I didn't have that kind of aversion, as before. Just the tit-for-tat of previous years was gone. He didn't like to talk much, but did a lot of practical things. Occasionally, I would still feel guilty about my past attitude towards him. I always felt that to some extent, I was similar to Lu Huai. He didn't like the people around him to be too close to the people he disliked, so I tried my best to show my loyalty to him. We were on the same side. Even if Lu Yu was more capable, we were still on the same side. Countless zombies surged towards the base, and the scene was in chaos. The sounds of zombies' bites, destruction, and the energy released by the ability users were intertwined. I held a big knife and resolutely joined this chaotic battle. The stench of rotting zombie flesh made me almost vomit. I swung my knife to cut off the heads of the zombies, and then used the knife to pry out the crystal nuclei inside and put them into my small bag. When all the zombies were successfully repelled, I was exhausted lying in the pile of rotting smelling zombies. I looked at the gray sky. In fact, I'm extremely afraid of hardship. Before the apocalypse arrived, my greatest wish was to be able to do nothing. I stood up, yet my mind was dizzy. The next second, I only heard someone exclaim, "Lu Huai has been bitten." My mind instantly went blank, and I could barely stand steadily on my feet. Someone supported my shoulders. The smell on Lu Yu was also extremely unpleasant. His eyebrows and eyes were clear and handsome. With the blue blood of zombies on his face, I shook off his hand and walked towards Lu Huai. The crowd dispersed. After I arrived, I saw his face gradually turning ashen. The crowd became restless. Someone tearfully proposed shooting Lu Huai while he hadn't turned into a zombie, yet he shook my head and stood in front of him. Suddenly, I thought of something. I have a way. I ran quickly towards the outside of the base. Opposite the Sunshine Base was an old hospital. I knocked hard on the iron gate outside. Through the gap of the iron gate, I saw the lush trees illuminated by the streetlights. Inside, a man in a black suit opened the door. Even in the apocalypse, he remained spotless. He smiled at me gently. "So, little one, have you made up your mind?" On Qin Feng's pale face, there was a forced smile, and his voice was faint. He chuckled. "If you had been 1 second slower, I wouldn't have been able to save your beloved either." Qin Feng was a madman when I was in high school. He lived in my house for a while at that time. He was only 17. The first gift he gave me was to dissect my cat, and then piece together the cat's bones, and place them on my desk. A disgusting and terrifying man. For a long time after that, I lived under his shadow. I also secretly took revenge on him, such as putting dead rats in his school bag, or putting mustard in his bread, but all our little tricks were countered by him without changing his expression. Finally, he even took away Lu Huai's throne of being the first in the grade, making Lu Huai very embarrassed. Pan, he was good at pretending in the entire military compound. The elders liked to praise him. He didn't move out of my house until he skipped grades and went to college. After meeting in the apocalypse, he became even more crazy and started capturing zombies for research. Every day I reached out and grabbed his sleeve. A trace of disgust flashed across his eyebrows and eyes. He gently withdrew his hand and was a bit displeased. "Just talk, don't touch me." I looked at my dirty hands, wiped them on my clothes, and pleaded in a low voice, "Save him. I'll catch zombies for you. I definitely won't dirty your precious hands." When I brought Qin Feng back, Lu Huai had miraculously recovered. The crowd was cheering around the little girl in the white dress. Ruan Yin was smiling shyly, and Lu Huai was gently wiping the stains on her hands with a tender look in his eyes. No one noticed me, who was covered in dirt. Qin Feng was wiping the scalpel in his hand, tilted his head and smiled at me, and whispered in my ear, "Little one, it seems you're about to be abandoned." I twitched the corners of my lips and suddenly had no strength to refute. In Lu Huai's eyes was a tenderness I had never seen before. He carefully wiped Ruan Yin's fingers, not leaving a single bit of dirt. I chased after him throughout my entire teenage years. Although he always had a cold look, he would help me finish my unfinished homework, send me the little cakes I liked when I was in a bad mood, run to a far away food street to bring me the octopus balls I loved, fold a large jar of stars with wishes about me written inside. Later, when we were in a relationship, although he was still very cold, he would still hold my hand and firmly tell my grandfather that he would protect me. Thought he was just used to being indifferent on weekdays and wasn't used to showing his kindness to me in front of others. But seeing his undisguised partiality today, I suddenly felt that perhaps the truth was not like that. I touched my short hair and felt the sticky zombie flesh and blood looking at their intertwined hands. I suddenly remembered that he and I hadn't held hands for a long time. Lu Yu stood in front of me, blocking my sight. I reached out and pushed him aside, rushed between the two of them, interrupting the lingering atmosphere between them. A girl's exclamation came from the side. I turned around and saw a person leaning backwards, about to fall. The next second, subconsciously, I caught the girl in my arms, her plump chest pressed against my chest, hitting me a bit painfully. I saw her panicked face and the fishy smell I had stained on her beautiful white dress. I felt a bit guilty before I could speak. Lu Huai pulled us apart. The girl's white dress had already been stained with a fishy smell and turned black and white in patches. He had a dark face and pinched my arm painfully. "Jingjia, apologize." I suddenly felt a bit wronged, shook off his hand, and ran towards the base. There was a moment of silence behind me, and I only heard the voices of the crowd. "Leave her alone. Sister Jing has always had a bad temper. Don't take it to heart." My eyes felt sour, and then I fell to the ground. My knee hurt terribly. I suddenly didn't want to get up. I was too tired. Tired all over. I looked at the sky. The white light had already lit up in the sky. It was almost dawn. I slowly got up. I had slept for a long time and had a long dream, but when I woke up, I couldn't remember anything. I only remembered a red dress fluttering like a butterfly. The door of the room was knocked. I opened the door and saw Lu Huai with a blank expression. I looked at him, and my voice was a bit hoarse. "What's the matter?" "Apologize." Hearing this, I was silent for 2 seconds. I had no strength left from yesterday until now. I had been fighting except for that small cake. I hadn't eaten anything, but his voice continued. "Jingjia, you're not a child anymore. Not everyone is your grandfather who will spoil your bad temper." I looked up at Lu Huai. He always seemed to be in that arrogant and high and mighty appearance, I looked at him with red eyes and raised my head high under his gaze. Lu Huai, since you dislike me so much, let's break up. He frowned, as if looking at a child making trouble without reason. Jingjia, what are you fussing about again? I reached out my hand to him. He looked at me in confusion. How long has it been since we held hands? As my boyfriend. You're so close to another woman, do you know that I will be sad too? He looked at me finally. He reached out his hand to me, but I suddenly withdrew my hand. He looked at Lu Huai and spoke softly. After finding my grandfather, I will propose to call off the engagement. He looked at me and suddenly asked, why? I thought for a while and still answered, you don't love me anymore. He laughed finally, his face turned cold, and he said, Jingjia, I don't know what kind of temper you're throwing, but stop making trouble, I'm really tired. In fact, he didn't care about my thoughts at all. No matter what I said, he would only say, Jingjia, stop making trouble. I was always the one making trouble without reason. I closed the door. My knee hurt terribly. I lifted my trouser leg. The injury from last night had already scabbed. The door was knocked again. I endured my impatience and opened the door. There was a small strawberry cake at the door. I found the note. It clearly read, don't starve, Lu. Ruan Yin awakened space, type and healing. Type abilities. Her space was not like ordinary space abilities that could only hold some things. Her space ability was very large and could hold an entire mall. Lu Huai would always take her with him when going to look for supplies. I snorted when I saw the two in front of me. Hearing this, Lu Yu looked back at me, felt a bit embarrassed. He took out a lollipop from his pocket and handed it to me. Eyes couldn't help but light up, but then I suddenly remembered that we weren't on the same side. I also thought of the way I used to look at him with a scowl. Like a snobbish person, my hand was neither in a position to reach out nor to withdraw, but Lu Yu had already unwrapped the lollipop and held it to my mouth, so I ate that lollipop with a clear conscience. It was so sweet. So sweet. I smiled at Lu Yu and met his smiling eyes. I felt that this scene was familiar, as if I had seen it somewhere before, so I smiled at him again. Ruan Yin didn't need to fight zombies. She just needed to put the supplies into her space in a safe place. When I went back after taking out the crystal nuclei, I saw that Ruan Yin and the others had already looted the mall completely. Usually, we couldn't loot all the supplies. Occasionally, we would also encounter people from other bases robbing us, and couldn't avoid a fight, but because of Ruan Yin's powerful space ability, our journey back was extremely smooth. When we met the people from the Chenxi base opposite, they saw our Long Bay appearance but empty hands and thought we hadn't found any supplies either. Inevitably, they made some sarcastic remarks. Everyone subconsciously surrounded Ruan Yin in the apocalypse. The malice of human nature was magnified. The weak were bullied, especially those as I, catching as Ruan Yin. Now that Ruan Yin's ability was so rare, she had to be protected even more. I looked at Lu Huai's somewhat nervous appearance. My heart seemed to be hit by a hammer. There was a spiritual spring in Ruan Yin's space that could treat the wounds bitten by zombies. She also used the spiritual spring to improve the soil and let people to open up land in the base to grow vegetables and fruits. Because of her, the base became orderly, and the ordinary people in the base also began to play a role. Because of Ruan Yin, and I could only receive orders in the hall every day, go out to complete tasks, fight with zombies to improve my abilities, and then bring back the crystal nuclei they needed that day. I carried a big bag of crystal nuclei home and saw them surrounding the little girl in the middle of the crowd. Cheering, I heard that the fruits and melons grown with Ruan Yin's spiritual spring could increase the level of ability users if eaten, and Ruan Yin showed a shy smile. Looking at the people around her foolishly, I silently put away the crystal nuclei and went to hand them in to exchange for food. The person exchanging food was a man. He casually handed me 2 packs of instant noodles, much less than yesterday. Yesterday there were at least 2 boxes of self-heating hot poti. Casually put the big knife in my hand on the table. The man sneered and crossed his arms to look at me. Sister Jing, you get what you deserve according to what you do. You can't not understand the rules of the base. These 2 packs of instant noodles today are still for Brother Lu's sake. Otherwise, why don't you also grow some vegetables that can increase the level of abilities? Not to mention anything else, if you can grow ordinary vegetables, you can take these ingredients as you like. My big knife was still stained with zombie blood. I lowered my head and took the knife and crystal nuclei on the table. Since they're not needed, I won't hand in the crystal nuclei anymore in the future. The man laughed. Then Sister Jing will have to work hard in the future. I looked at the familiar yet strange people around me and suddenly realized that in fact, the end of the world was like physics, just that my previous thoughts were too idealistic. I always thought that everything would pass in the following days. I was the first to take on all the tasks every day, except for exchanging food. I went out to fight zombies. Ruan Yin cultivated some non-infected poultry like chicks and ducklings from the spiritual spring in her space. The base was expanding more and more. Everyone started going out to look for supplies less and less, and there were fewer and fewer tasks. They spent more time training on the training ground. The high-level people in the base had fresh vegetables and fruits every day, except me. Lu Huai and I fell into a strange cold war, but he still put desserts at my door at night. Everyone told me to give in to Lu Huai. They also vaguely felt that the atmosphere between Lu Huai and me was wrong. I looked at the person chatting with Ruan Yin. I snorted, put down the crystal nuclei I had obtained today, and felt Lu Huai's gaze. I just smiled. Give in? Give in for what? What did I do wrong that I have to give in? In fact, I've always been a narrow-minded person, so I cared a lot about Ruan Yin's appearance and Lu Huai's special treatment of her. I just didn't understand that when he told me he didn't like Lu Yu, I tried my best to exclude him, but when I clearly expressed my dislike for his closeness to Ruan Yin, he couldn't do the same. Ruan Yin cooked a bowl of noodles for me at night. She was wearing a beautiful white dress. It seemed she was always like this, spotlessly clean. I didn't reject her noodles, but suddenly, when I reached out my hand, I saw the dirt under my fingernails in the apocalypse. Water resources were scarce. The daily water supply of water type ability users was also limited. There wasn't even enough for drinking, let alone for washing somehow. A hard-to-describe sense of inferiority welled up in my heart clearly. Before the apocalypse, I was also a person who was doted on by my grandfather. I thanked her. She didn't seem to talk much. She was very shy in everything she did. When she saw that I had accepted her noodles, she seemed to let out a sigh of relief. Obvious joy overflowed from her eyebrows and eyes, and then she happily ran to another room. One day, when we went out to look for supplies, we were attacked by people from other bases. They seemed to have heard that the Sunshine Base could improve the soil to cultivate vegetables that could enhance abilities. A group of people rushed straight towards Ruan Yin Lu Huai, and several ability users were held back, and Ruan Yin was taken away. I remembered the noodles Ruan Yin gave me that day. I raised my heels and followed, perhaps because they saw that Ruan Yin was beautiful. They had evil thoughts. Again I only heard Ruan Yin's shrill scream. I threw the knife in my hand, which hit the man's head directly. Blood splashed all over Ruan Yin's face, and the man slowly lay down, twitched once, and then lost his life. This was the first time I had killed a person. I usually showed no mercy when killing zombies. Everyone called me the Grim Reaper with a knife. But today, I really became the Grim Reaper. I looked at my hand, and slowly squatted down. The surrounding noise suddenly quieted down. I saw everyone stop their actions, and the hateful eyes of the opposite base. Lu Huai immediately covered Ruan Yin with his kawadi, looked at everyone and slowly blinked my eyes. Later, everyone in the base said, "Look at that Jing Jie, she kills without batting an eye." Lu Huai came to see me at night. He looked into my eyes and spoke to me in a gentle voice, which was rare. He said, "Jing Jie, thank you." I looked at him and suddenly felt a bit sad, but I just smiled and said, "Those beasts who bully women deserve to die. Even if it were someone else today, I would have done the same." I don't consider myself a person with an overwhelming sense of justice, but it's hard for me to remain indifferent when facing such things, even though such things are already common in the apocalypse. But I still can't stand it. I thought about the 5th month of the apocalypse, when I was also bullied like this. The suppression of ordinary people by ability users was powerful. I bit off that person's ear. I remembered that I was about to escape, but the next second, my hair was grabbed. It hurt a lot. That was the first time I used my ability, but it only made him leave. Later, that person was scratched by a zombie, and became a zombie. I have always improved my physical strength by fighting with others. Later, finally, few people could beat me. Can only say that I'm glad that my grandfather has always trained me militarily, which allows me to survive in the apocalypse without relying on my ability. But I have never grown my hair long again. Lu Huai's voice continued, "Jing Jie, stop being angry with me." I was so angry that I laughed instead. He seemed to think he had given me a chance to back down. I straightened my back and sneered, "Lu Huai, I remember I made it very clear we broken up." I really liked him, but his indecisive appearance now, even wanting to have his cake and eat it too, made me feel disgusted. My grandfather always said that people should have backbone, so when he didn't care about me that much in his heart, any explanation was unnecessary. The people in the base treated me with increasing respect, but began to gradually distance themselves from me. Knew the reason, but also thought it was understandable. I was lying in bed. The cup opposite flew into my hand. He wanted to test my ability, but it was still too weak. Every time I used it, my head hurt terribly, but every time I used it, my ability became stronger than before. I curled up in bed in pain, sweating profusely. Then, in a daze, I only heard anxious calls, "Jing Jie." I grabbed Ruan Yin's hand and whispered, Don't tell others." When I woke up, I saw white everywhere. A man in a white coat was holding a scalpel. The light was reflected on his thin glasses, giving off a strange light. I opened my mouth, but couldn't say anything. Qin Feng looked down at me and smiled at me. "Little one, your ability should be a spiritual type ability?" The string in my mind broke, and there were only 2 words left. "It's over." I stared at him as he inserted strange machines on me. Qin Feng's pale and thin fingers gently stroked my short hair. He bent down and whispered in my ear, "Be good, it won't hurt." I stared at him intently. My wrists were tied with something made of special material. I didn't know how long I had been in this place. I could only survive on nutrient solution every day, and my body was manipulated by various instruments. The machines stimulated the ability in my brain. The pain made Miran Budo scream, until I had no strength left, and my voice was hoarse. I looked at Qin Feng viciously and threatened, "Lu Huai won't let you go." Qin Feng looked at me, as if he wanted to laugh, until one day, several people's voices came from the laboratory. Lu Huai's voice was obviously anxious. "Haven't you figured out her ability yet? How far can it go? Can it be transferred?" Qin Feng's voice with a smile sounded, "Everything in the world, whatever she thinks, can be used by her." My heart shuddered. Great panic struck, accompanied by indescribable heartache, almost making me unable to breathe. And the voices of those people continued, "Will she be okay?" Lu Huai's voice was indifferent. Then came Qin Feng's voice, "To obtain powerful strength, some things must be sacrificed." His voice was with a smile, "My experiment will succeed." When those people came in, I saw Ruan Yin with full of worry in her eyes. She seemed very guilty, and almost didn't dare to look into my eyes. I couldn't speak. A few weak sounds came from my throat, with a pleading tone, "Save me." Ruan Yin gently turned her head away, not daring to look at me, and Lu Huai gently touched my head. "Don't be afraid, it'll be okay." My heart sank to the bottom. My eyes were extremely sore, but no tears fell. We grew up together as childhood sweethearts, but it still couldn't withstand the greed in people's hearts every day. Qin Feng put strange instruments on my head, with a weak electric current, but it made me extremely painful. I cried and begged him, "Brother Qin Feng, let me go. Let me go." Qin Feng was stunned for a moment, but he just smiled. Then his voice was like that of a Shura from hell. "Little one, Bear with it a little longer. Until the instruments in the laboratory burst one by one. Qin Feng showed a satisfied smile and I fainted from the pain even in my dreams. It still hurt terribly. I didn't know how long I had slept every day when I woke up. I felt extremely weak. Qin Feng pried open my mouth and forcefully poured nutrient solution into it. I closed my eyes and only heard him say softly, "Staying with me. At least you won't die." I ignored him but Qin Feng chuckled, pinched the flesh on my face, and put his hand on my forehead. "You've lost weight." Crazy, this crazy person. I didn't know how long I had been in the laboratory. The ability in my mind rioted every day. I tried not to think about it, but I couldn't control it. From the initial pleading to the later giving up. Every time the current passed through my brain, the headache caused by using my ability made me want to bite my tongue and commit suicide. The siren sounded. I could hear it even lying in the small laboratory. I closed my eyes and released my ability, feeling thousands of zombies. Outside, the zombies surrounded the city, and no one survived. I tried to use my ability to unlock the restraints on my hands and feet. The next second, a sharp pain hit my head. I forced myself to get up and finally fell to the ground due to weakness in my hands and feet. It took a while to recover, and then slowly got up again. The door of the laboratory was tightly locked. I tried to open it, but my head hurt so much that I could hardly stand. I leaned against the wall. Breathing heavily, I suddenly felt very powerless. Just one wall away, I could get out. Tears flowed silently. Suddenly, the door was opened. Ruan Yin in a white dress stood in front of me in a panic. She had a key in her hand and was about to reach out to help me. Took a step back and looked at her in silence. She lowered her head, her eyes red, and whispered, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to tell them about your ability. I didn't want to harm you at that time. You were unconscious. They asked me what happened. I didn't expect that the later development would be like this." "Why?" I heard my voice was a bit hoarse. Ruan Yin said, "I didn't mean to harm you. It's just that they asked why you were unconscious." Lu Huai was very fierce at that time. He was very worried about you, so I told him I didn't expect it to be like this later. "I'm sorry, Jing Jia." She said that because of her ability, she needed powerful people to protect her, so she could only stand on Lu Huai's side. She said, "Jing Jia, I had no choice." My voice was hoarse. I asked her softly, "But I can also protect you." I lowered my eyes and saw that my clothes were hanging on me because these days, I had been relying on nutrient solution to survive, so my clothes seemed very loose. "But I won't protect you anymore in the future," I said softly. I thought that I probably wouldn't have any friends in the future. I ran towards the outside of the base. Everyone was running inside. Squeals were incessant. They were going to escape from the basement under the high city wall. Countless zombies surrounded. Almost without an end in sight, I heard the voices of Qin Feng and Lu Huai. Someone ran towards me. Heard Lu Yu's voice. The wind on the city wall was very strong. I turned around and saw his haggard eyebrows and eyes. He was as thin as a matchstick. It was so strange in his eyes. I saw worry clearly. Our relationship wasn't even good. I heard them call my name, asking me to come back. I ran faster and faster. My footsteps even had double images. I looked back. Lu Yu behind me was held back by Qin Feng. The door of the basement was slowly closed. All the voices disappeared in my ears. I jumped off the city wall and only heard the howling. Windy didn't want to go back. It hurt too much. It really hurt too much. I had a very, very long dream. I was in a secret room, flipping through a book, but when I woke up, I couldn't remember the content I saw at all. When I woke up, I was in an abandoned factory. Someone was sniffing on me, testing to bite the soft flesh on my neck. My eyes sharpened, and I kicked out. The person on me was kicked to the ground. I saw the person in front of me clearly. To be exact, it should be a zombie. The teenager looked only 17 or 18 years old. He wasn't wearing any clothes, revealing his thin and pale chest, and a pair of shorts that were about to burst at the bottom. He had a pair of light gray eyes, a high-bridged nose, and pale lips. He tilted his head to look at me. As innocent as a child, he was so good looking. Bah! That wasn't the point. The point was that even as a zombie, he was still so lecherous. The teenager looked at me, and there seemed to be a bit of grievance in his gray, white eyes. He was different from other zombies. He wasn't delirious, and didn't just bite people. So I slowly lowered my guard. He found an iron rod in the abandoned factory. The teenager also found an iron rod. He yawned, and the teenager yawned along with me. Grinned at him, and he grinned back at me. Was annoyed, and raised my hand to make a fancy move in the air. This move seemed a bit difficult for him. His hand shook several times, and almost got knotted. I was suddenly at a loss for words. I glared at him and said, "Don't imitate me." The teenager looked at me, and his gray, white eyes seemed to be covered with a layer of water mist. He looked both wronged and pitiful. I inquired, "Was it you who saved me?" He seemingly couldn't understand human speech, and gave no response. I wiped the iron rod clean. Outside the abandoned factory was a bay. The wind blew in, carrying a gust of rotting stench. My stomach rumbled with hunger. The young man followed behind me, stepping on the stones barefoot. His soles were cut by the sharp stones, yet he seemed not to feel the pain. I turned around and met his gray eyes. After ascertaining that he posed no danger, I let him be. Since the apocalypse had arrived, encountering strange people and events was nothing out of the ordinary. I discovered a row of residential houses behind the factory, perhaps former staff dormitories. There were several zombies lingering in the dormitory, and I smashed their heads with a single strike of the rod. However, I was extremely weak at the moment, and didn't have my big knife with me. Glanced at the young man behind me, and beckoned to him. His eyes curved. I found a small knife, demonstrated to him how to quickly extract the crystal nucleus, and then handed the knife to him. The little zombie looked at me in confusion, then started to extract the crystal nucleus with great effort. Seeing his fingers covered with zombie brain matter, a hint of disgust appeared in his eyes. He held his hands in front of me. Although there was little expression on his face, I seemed to perceive his grievance. I felt a bit like laughing, recalling the little white dog I had raised before the apocalypse, so I reached out and stroked his soft hair. Then the little Zombie busied himself again with great effort. I went outside to find a large hemp bag, a clean quilt, and finally a pack of expired instant noodles. The instant noodles were no longer crispy and emitted a faint musty smell, suppressing the nausea welling up in my heart. I ate the noodles with the water in the bucket finally. There was something in my empty stomach. I rummaged through the entire house and found a men's shirt. I took off my clothes, found a wet tissue on the table, and wiped myself. Briefly rustling footsteps came from downstairs. I turned around, and two naked people stared at each other. The little zombie held the crystal nuclei in both hands, his hair exuding joy, and the tuft of hair on his head swayed merrily as he walked quickly towards me through the dirty clothes I had taken off onto his face under the pitch-black clothes. The little zombie let out a plaintive whine-bah. Even as a zombie, he was still so lecherous. He obediently held the crystal nuclei, but made no move. I watched him warily, seeing that he didn't move. I quickly changed my clothes under the quilt. When I peeked out, he was still in the same position, with the black clothes hanging on his head. I reached out and pulled them off. He lowered his eyes, his lips tightly pursed, and the tuft of hair on his head drooped listlessly. He held the crystal nuclei and presented them in front of me, yet refused to look at me. Belatedly realized that the little zombie in front of me seemed to be angry. I took the crystal nuclei. His head leaned towards me. Was puzzled. He seemed a bit anxious. Looking at me with wet gray eyes, I tentatively reached out and stroked his head. The corners of his tightly pursed lips curved slightly, and his entire body exuded a sense of joy. I found him a set of clothes he couldn't put them on and obediently let me dress him. As docile as a little child preparing to go to school, my vigilance towards him gradually dissipated. The clothes were a bit tight, and the tight, fitting pants made him look top heavy. Presumably, the original owner of the clothes was a street smart guy. I wiped his hands with a wet tissue, absorbed the crystal nuclei, found him a pair of leather shoes, and was lucky to find a car key in the drawer. I went behind the house and saw the only off-road vehicle. I planned to set off for the southern base in Kyoto, and thus part ways with the little zombie. I saw the little zombie's wet eyes. Blank and obedient, I furrowed my brows and resolutely got into the car. In the rear view mirror, his figure grew smaller and smaller. The car had been driving for a long time. I casually looked out of the window and was startled. A beautiful head was pressed against my window. Although his expression hadn't changed, I could still tell that he was very aggrieved, even a bit sad. He stopped the car and opened the door. The little zombie obediently sat in the passenger seat. I asked, "What's your name? Why are you following me?" He didn't speak, lowering his head and ignoring me. Imitated the sound of a zombie, but he still didn't react. I knew he was angry again. I looked up and saw the yellow flower hanging in the car. So I said, "Then I'll call you Xiaohua?" Xiaohua. I looked at him and called tentatively. Finally, he looked up at me, his lips curving upwards and his eyes bending. Good. He liked this name. Halfway through the journey, we arrived at a gas station. He skillfully smashed the heads of the zombies in the gas station. Xiaohua cleverly picked out the crystal nuclei from the zombies' heads and then happily presented them to me with both hands. Like offering a precious treasure, the little tuft of hair on his head swayed merrily, and he pushed his head hard into my palm. He smiled amusedly and gently stroked his head. He put his hands in front of me again, indicating that I should help him wipe his hands. His manner was so natural I was helpless. Well, why argue with stupid Xiaohua? I glared at him and whispered, "Stupid Xiaohua." His eyes curved, not understanding what I was saying. He obediently opened his palms for me to wipe. Just like a little dog, this stretch of road was perhaps remote, as few people had come here. I cleared out all the items in the gas station store and found a recreational vehicle on the roadside. I also moved the DVD player from the store. Without the internet in the apocalypse, I moved this for Xiaohua to pass the time. I only regretted that Xiaohua was a stupid zombie and couldn't drive with a lollipop in my mouth. I drove on the road because the road was remote. There were only a few zombies along the way. Every time I killed a zombie, Xiaohua would dig for the crystal nucleus with a small knife. With great effort, looking at the few crystal nuclei Xiaohua presented, I sighed softly. Xiaohua looked at me in confusion and then stretched out his hand. He wiped it clean for him with a wet tissue. His fingers were very beautiful, pale and slender. I carefully wiped them clean, thinking that these hands were like a work of art carved by God. Although Xiaohua was stupid, Xiaohua was beautiful. Xiaohua bent his eyes, lowered his head, and his gray eyes reflected my figure at night. I parked the recreational vehicle on the road. The leaves outside rustled in the windy. Cooked a pack of instant noodle. Xiaohua didn't need to eat, which made me a bit envious. I tried to use my ability, although my head still hurt. It was much better than before. I had previously discovered the peculiarity of my ability. Others' abilities were the most common ones, like metal, wood, water, fire, earth, lightning, and ice, but my ability could control things according to what I thought in my mind, and even control zombies. However, every time I used it, my head would ache unbearably. But this ability could be gradually enhanced by absorbing crystal nuclei, and it was unknown whether there was an upper limit. But when I didn't have the strength to protect my precious ability, I didn't tell anyone yet. An accident still occurred. Thinking of Lu Huai and the others, I sighed softly. Turning around, I saw Xiaohua on the opposite bed. Stupid Xiaohua. Xiaohua bent his eyes and imitated my action of closing his eyes and covering himself with the quilt. When I woke up in the morning, Xiaohua wasn't in the recreational vehicle. I called out several times, but didn't see his figure. I drove the car and continued north. After an unknown amount of time, I stopped the car to rest. Along the way, through the car window, I saw Xiaohua's beautiful face and his expressionless face that faintly revealed a bit of grievance. He was dirty all over, and his whole body seemed to be screaming, "I'm sad." He kept his head down and refused to look at Methan. He stuffed the tattered plastic bag in his hand into my hand. All at once, the crystal nuclei were shining brightly and were very beautiful. His hands were also dirty. I was about to get a wet tissue to wipe them for him. But he got into the recreational vehicle with his hands behind his back. Oh, stupid Xiaohua was angry. The sign that Xiaohua was angry was that he wouldn't look at people. He sat there with his hands behind his back, not washing. The pants on his body were perhaps too tight, and the button had come apart, revealing his torn underwear. I leaned in front of him. He quickly closed his eyes in short. He refused to look at me, moved closer, and gently patted his head, saying, "Stupid Xiaohua." After 2 seconds, he opened his gray eyes, and the tuft of hair on his head drooped listlessly. Looking at the crystal nuclei in my hand, I felt very guilty. I gently patted his head and coaxed in a low voice, Okay, don't be angry. I won't leave you behind next time." Only then did he stretch out his hand. He carefully wiped his hands clean. The atmosphere around Xiaohua became joyous. He lowered his head and stuck out his head. I reached out and touched it, feeling a bit amused. "You're not a little dog." Xiaohua couldn't understand human speech and just grinned at me. When taking a break on the way near the intersection, a group of people surrounded my recreational vehicle. It seemed to be from a certain base. I found a mask for Xiaohua in the recreational vehicle and put it on him, only revealing his gray eyes. There were about 20-odd fierce-looking men on the opposite side. The leader was a tattooed man, a wood-type ability user. His vines surrounded my car, and he held a knife in his hand, smiling at me maliciously. "Miss, we're all going to the capital city. Let's go together." I tightened my grip on the iron rod in my hand and looked at the people in front of me. Such things were very common in the apocalypse. If it was just a simple robbery, it would be considered mild, but his eyes were covetously fixed on me. Held the iron rod and asked with a smile, "So, big brother, what do you want?" Their expressions changed. "Miss, what are you talking about? We just want to make friends." As soon as he finished speaking, his hand reached out towards me, swung the iron rod, hitting him directly in the crotch. The man let out a wail. A lightning type ability user launched an ability at me, bent down to dodge. After all, I was outnumbered. I was lifted by a strength type ability user and smashed hard onto the ground. The expected pain didn't come. The young man in the black shirt rushed over like a bolt of lightning. He smelled of orange shower gel from just taking a bath. The eyes under the young man's mask were gray. When I saw Xiaohua, my heart skipped a beat. I started to use my ability. Those people seemed to be controlled and began to kill each other. Finally, my head hurt, and I fainted. When I woke up, I was sleeping in the recreational vehicle. Xiaohua was nowhere to be seen. I stood up. The sunlight outside was about to set. Orange clouds rarely appeared in the twilight sky under the setting sun. The wind blew through the young man's hair. I saw his blood-stained face and his lonely and profound gray eyes under his body. Blood flowed all over the ground. I called out his name. He seemed to come to his senses and came to my side at an extremely fast speed, holding his blood-stained hands in front of me. His lips were dyed a bright red, the only splash of color on his pale face. He was stupid Xiaohua. Since then, I found that my ability had become even more powerful. Perhaps it was due to the continuous crystal nuclei in recent days, or perhaps the more I used my ability, the faster it advanced. It was no longer a problem for me to control a small zombie every day. Although my head still hurt, it wasn't as painful as before. When I wished I could cut off my head, we continued our journey. When I was driving, Xiaohua watched those melodramatic DVDs to pass the time in the back. Occasionally, when I looked back, I would see him watching intently. When driving, I could also occasionally hear the sound of the TV series from the back. "No, Monru, I love you. I can't live without you. But we're siblings." Then came ambiguous sounds. I called him, "Stupid Xiaohua." He looked up, glanced at me, and suddenly got up, climbed to the passenger seat, leaned over, and his ice-cold lips touched my cheek. I was stunned. What on earth was this guy watching? I earnestly corrected his thinking. "I'm driving. Drive in a regulated manner. Don't be distracted while driving." He smiled at me, bending his eyes, and pointed to his face. I slapped his head. He looked at me in confusion, and the corners of his mouth slowly pursed. I sighed. "Well, I won't argue with stupid Xiaohua." The closer we got to the capital city, the more zombies we encountered, and the colder the climate became. On the day I arrived in the capital city, it snowed. I drove the car and headed straight for the southern base. Outside, there was a test to detect the levels of ability users. Many ability users were queuing up. I pulled Xiaohua and joined the line. For ordinary people, the inspection wasn't strict. It was just a simple registration and the submission of supplies. And then they let us in. There were very few ordinary people queuing up in the apocalypse, where the fittest survived. Few people could make it alive to the legendary City of Hope. However, I didn't find my grandfather here. Since I was an ordinary person, I didn't have the opportunity to receive orders in the hall or go out to look for supplies with them. I was assigned by a small leader of the base to work in the logistics. Growing vegetables. Xiaohua would still go out to find crystal nuclei at night, and he could find a large bag each time. Thus, there was a rumor in the base about an anonymous hero. The hero was named the Head Smasher Hero because the hero had a clear target and only focused on the heads. The ant who grew vegetables with me in the base and gossiped with me looked at me with great pity. "Your younger brother is a bit simple-minded. It must have been very difficult for you to come all the way here, right?" I glanced at Xiaohua, who was digging the soil with great effort, and didn't say anything. He noticed my gaze, looked up, and smiled at me blankly. After growing vegetables in the southern base for more than half a year, every day, bases large and small came to seek refuge in the southern base. Various cities were captured by zombies, and the southern base seemed to have become the hope of the apocalypse. As the number of people increased, the place became a mixed bag. Originally, they were all leaders of their own bases, but now they could only be merged into a small team within the large base. No one was convinced by others, so there were fights and brawls among ability users. Every day I was then dispatched to the infirmary to deal with external injuries. One day, A man I hadn't seen for a long time appeared in the infirmary. He was also very shocked to see me. Lu Yu had lost a lot of weight, and his pale body was on the verge of collapse. He looked at me and suddenly laughed and cried at the same time, hugging me tightly in his arms and mumbling, "It's good that you're okay, it's good that you're alive." I reached out and pushed him away. I didn't have a grudge against Lu Yu, but we weren't close either since he was from the Sunshine Base. I couldn't even bring myself to like him. Xiaohua made a ha sound. I turned around and saw Xiaohua's expressionless face. He lowered his eyes and didn't look at me. This stupid Xiaohua was always getting angry. Lu Yu looked at Xiaohua, gradually released his hand, and then said in a low voice, "Leave the southern base, it's not safe here." My hand stopped in the middle of looking for medicine. Looking at Lu Yu's pale face, the content of my dream suddenly became clear in my mind. Later, the southern base split, and Lu Yu became the leader of one of the sides. The three bases restrained and counterbalanced each other, maintaining a strange equilibrium. Such a scene suddenly appeared in my mind. I saw the pale and thin Lu Yu sitting alone under the high wall, hugging a white skeleton. The red dress on the white skeleton was gorgeous, and his beautiful face was full of guilt. Then he jumped off the wall. But who were the other two sides? I still listened to Lu Yu's words and left with Xiaohua. Lu Huai and his group had come to the southern base a week earlier due to their outstanding abilities and Ruan Yin's space ability. They smoothly took up management positions. I remembered the electric current passing through my body and the uncontrollable pain in my mind caused by using my ability without absolute strength. I didn't want to meet them directly, but just as I was about to step out, the siren of the base sounded. For some unknown reason, a zombie tide broke out against Xiaohua, and I hid in the basement of the pharmacy pressing against Xiaohua. Through the gaps in the crowd, I saw Lu Huai arranging matters in an orderly manner. In a flash, I suddenly remembered the content of my dream. This was a male-oriented novel titled Apocalypse Domination. The male protagonist, Lu Huai, rose rapidly in the apocalypse and became a dominant figure in the apocalypse, and I was the fiancé who dedicated my ability to the male protagonist and finally went crazy. I was one of Lu Huai's harem members, a marginal female lead, and a mere accessory to the male protagonist. In the book I read in my dream, I voluntarily dedicated my ability and was willing to share my husband with other women. In the end, Lu Huai became the overlord of the apocalypse, accompanied by a large group of brothers who had gone through thick and thin with him at the same time. He had Ruan Yin, the innocent girl with space ability, the younger sister of a certain high-level person in the base, and various outstanding women who adored him. And I, after actively offering my ability, went crazy because of the extreme pain during the research of ability transfer. Finally, I jumped off the city wall and died in the pile of zombies. Even though he had countless women, later the image of myself in the book eventually became the white moonlight in Lu Huai's heart. The picture emerged in my Mindy bent over, suppressing the discomfort welling up in my stomach, and suddenly felt extremely disgusted. How could I be willing to be such a person? How could I be willing to share a man with other women? And how could I be willing to be someone else's vassal? Why was it that only men could strive for dominance in the apocalypse? Later, when the zombies surrounded the city, the southern base was forced to be divided into 3 parts. Lu Huai, with his powerful ability, became the leader of the southern base, but was betrayed by his younger brother, Lu Yu, who took away the elites of the southern base and dealt a heavy blow to it. Since then, the 3 sides stood in a stalemate. As for the third side, I slowly raised my head and looked at the confused Xiaohua. He supported me, and a hint of anxiety showed in his gray eyes. It was him. And yet it wasn't him. The young man in the dream had a pair of cold eyes. He was wearing a white shirt and black pants. Standing on the high city wall, he reached out extremely quickly and dug out a person's heart. He looked at his hand with great disgust on his face. I waved my hand at him, indicating that I was okay. Xiaohua hooked his fingers with mine, and finally, his cold palm pressed against mine. He put his forehead against mine, and his eyes were curved. This was a scene from the countless melodramatic TV series he had watched. I sighed softly and didn't reject his intimacy. Alas, he was just a stupid Xiaohua. I didn't know how long the fight outside lasted. Leaning against Xiaohua, I was drowsy. I used my ability to possess a zombie outside and saw the situation outside. Countless zombies were climbing along the city wall. They were extremely fast, and the barrier set up by the ability users could no longer hold. Ruan Yin beside them used the spiritual spring in her space to heal the ability users bitten by zombies, and Lu Huai stood at the front. He was already a 5th level ability user. I instinctively looked over and met his gaze. His eyes were sharp, as if exuding a powerful intense pain struck, and my head ached. Xiaohua's gaze was anxious. He supported me and gently massaged my temples. I didn't know where he learned this action. Probably from the TV series. My face was deathly pale, but my mind gradually cleared under his massage. Now, my ability was becoming stronger and stronger, and I had fewer headaches. I didn't know how long it had passed. The half-open door of the basement was opened. I instinctively buried my face in Xiaohua's chest as the man approached. The sense of oppression gradually increased until the man's voice sounded, "Jingjia, I know it's you." I stiffened all over. I knew I would encounter them, but I didn't expect it to be so soon. Xiaohua held my hand and instinctively stood in front of me to protect me. Lu Huai, as always, had an arrogant expression, as if someone owed him money. I raised my head thinking of what happened in the dream and Lu Huai's arrogant demeanor. I snorted coldly. Damn it. Why could a person like Lu Huai be the male protagonist? Lu Huai looked at me and Xiaohua coldly and said in a cold voice, "Jingjia, you're with a zombie? Jingjia, do you know what you're doing? Even if your ability can control zombies for your use, if it gets out of control, the entire base will suffer." Xiaohua's eyes showed a fierce light. I stood in front of him to protect him. I suddenly regretted trying to test that troublesome ability. If Xiaohua fell into their hands, he would surely be dissected. Lu Huai, I really didn't expect you to be such a greedy, despicable, and shameless person even though we've broken up. After all these years of our relationship, at least we're friends. I haven't done anything to do with you. On the contrary, you want to steal my ability. Thinking of this, I suddenly felt sad. Lu Huai, you've made me afraid to give my heart to anyone for the rest of my life. Lu Huai frowned, looking extremely impatient, and only said, Jingjia, I can explain all these. Stop being so unreasonable, okay? There it was again. I suddenly felt it was ironic. I didn't understand why I was so blinded by love that I fell for such a person. So, out of extreme anger, I laughed. This action made his face turn ugly immediately. Jingjia, do you know how special your ability is? He seemed not to know how to start, but his subordinate behind him whispered, Sister Jing, you also know that this ability doesn't have much use on you. It's better to give it to Brother Huai. Brother Huai can lead us to a higher level of development in the future. When you get married, everyone will respect you as Sister Jing. Thinking of my ending in the original book, I suddenly remembered the crocodile tears Lu Huai shed after my death. In the book, he clearly had many women around him, but was still praised by everyone for his deep affection. Lu Huai continued, this might be an opportunity for humans and zombies to coexist peacefully, or even completely wipe them out. Jingjia, this isn't a child's play. If your grandfather were here, he would also do this. I raised my hand and slapped him hard, viciously saying, my grandfather would never do that. Don't make those high-sounding excuses for your greed. I felt a cold touch on my wrist. Xiaohua held my wrist. I turned around and saw a pair of cold eyes. The young man in the dream overlapped with the person in front of Methan. The next second, he lowered his head and blew on my reddened palm twice. I was stunned. Goodness, this was really out of place. In the end, we couldn't leave the southern base smoothly. I underestimated Lu Huai's greed for powerful strength, and overestimated our relationship of so many years. In an emergency, I still used my ability. The zombie tide that had just subsided surged up again when using my ability. It really felt extremely painful. More painful than ever before, but I couldn't stop. I grabbed Lu Huai and tried to control him with my ability, but his ability level was higher than mine. I couldn't hold back my tears, and I was in so much pain that I could barely stand. I saw countless guns pointing at you as I heard Lu Huai's voice. Why bother? Give me your ability, and I'll protect you in the future. But why are you always so stubborn? Xiaohua held me in his arms and jumped off the city while a large number of zombies bypassed us and rushed straight towards the southern base. Blocking in front of us, the young man carried me and ran forward quickly. When I opened my eyes in a daze, I saw him stop. He lowered his head and reverently kissed away the tears on my face. The young man's hair tickled my face. He carefully kissed away the tears at the corners of my eyes. One by one, bullets penetrated the young man's chest, but his expression didn't change at all. Shot after shot hit his back, making him stagger. So I cried even harder. Stupid Xiaohua. The most important thing now was to run. I was in a coma for a long time when I woke up. It was already several days later. I was in a place similar to an underground mall, but all the supplies inside had been taken away. There was water and food beside me. Strangely, I didn't feel very hungry. Instead, I felt that my ability inside my body was becoming stronger. I opened my mouth and called Xiaohua. Only then did rustling sounds come from the corner. Xiaohua was wrapped in plastic bags. A hint of guilt showed in his eyes. I gently tore off the plastic bags sticking to his body. He covered himself unhappily with his hands. I saw the gunshot wounds on his body. With the skin and flesh turned outwards and pus oozing, he continued to cover them, not letting me look, and the surrounding aura became a bit more anxious. I put on a serious face and glared at him. After a few seconds, he reluctantly thunkai his fingers. Are you afraid I'll worry? I asked him. Xiaohua didn't respond. I sighed softly and suddenly asked, then are you afraid of looking ugly? Xiaohua nodded and then covered the wound. Feeling embarrassed, he lowered his head, not daring to look at me. Felt both Xintung and angry. Finally, I reached out and ruffled his hair forcefully. Xiaohua's injuries were very serious. He seemed not to feel the pain. The wounds were slowly healing. I gradually felt relieved when Xiaohua's body had slowly recovered to its former state. I packed up and prepared to set off. By this time, I had more important things to do since my ability was gradually getting stronger. I could control some zombies to escort us, but every time I used it, my head hurt unbearably. Xiaohua would then rub and blow on my head for me, although it didn't have much effect. He was a stubborn zombie. Every time I used my ability, my power became stronger. Coupled with the crystal nuclei Xiaohua found for me, I could control more and more zombies. No wonder everyone wanted to have powerful strength. However, in the apocalypse, it was not advisable to fight alone, all the time looking at the zombies mending the fence for me. I finally made a big decision, hanging a simple wooden board. The Spark base was thus established with a middle school as the unit, since there were only Xiaohua and me in the base at first. It was named Spark. A single spark can start a prairie fire. In the early days of the base's establishment, Xiaohua and I spent about half a year looking for supplies outside. Xiaohua was strong and fast. I could also use my ability to control zombies to do hard labor, although it wasn't too tiring. It wasn't easy either. Come to the Spark base. Zombies will be your underlings. Come to the Spark base. Zombies will do hard labor for you. Safety is guaranteed. The Spark base is trustworthy. The big loudspeaker found in the school broadcast the slogan far and wide. In the end, there were really people signing up to join the base, and it started to take shape now. There had been some riots in the southern base, which were suppressed by Lu Huai with force. Lu Huai became the leader, and he led people to take over other bases. He claimed it was cooperation among bases, but in fact, he was forcibly seizing other bases. His ambition was obvious to almost everyone. As the number of people increased, conflicts often occurred between bases. Before long, It was said that Lu Yu, with some high-level ability users from the base, had re-established a new base named the Moonlight Base. Listening to the news brought to me by a subordinate, I was happily gossiping looking at the infected and barren soil at the back of the base. I sighed. I really wanted to eat vegetables too. The two bases in the southern base would fight whenever they met. I didn't know what deep hatred they had and I took advantage of the chaos to loot their supplies. Heaven have mercy, the supplies were just there, not moving at alley. Thought no one wanted them. It wasn't my fault, but every time, Lu Huai would fly into a rage and even abandon his good upbringing and curse. Jingjia, is it interesting for you to secretly follow us? I touched my nose. I really didn't understand what he was talking about. After all, he didn't build this road in the middle of the fight. They temporarily ceased fire. Lu, you casually took out an ice cream and handed it to me. There was still a wisp of cool air rising from it. I asked curiously, you have a space? I didn't refuse his ice cream. Ice cream was hard to come by in the apocalypse. I took out a bag of crystal nuclei from my pocket and handed it to him. Lu Yu was stunned for a moment, seemingly not expecting me to take the initiative to talk to him. Then he smiled at me shyly and whispered, it's very small. It can only hold a few things, but it can freeze time, so no matter what is put in, it will be very fresh when taken out. I was almost envious to the point of crying then. Whenever I wanted to eat a small cake, I could eat it at any time. Xiaohua beside me scratched my palm. Hardy turned around and saw Xiaohua turn his head. Goodness. Xiaohua was angry again. This Xiaohua was always getting angry for no reason. He came closer and took a bite of my ice cream. I frowned and ruffled his hair vigorously. His hair had grown very long, and I tied it into a half bun with a small rubber band. He still seemed a bit angry, but the slightly upturned corners of his lips betrayed his emotions. It's so easy to coax stupid Xiaohua. After coaxing him, I continued to seriously educate him. Xiaohua, this is bad behavior. Don't learn it. What was this called in TV dramas? Green tea behavior. Xiaohua nodded obediently. I sighed. Alas, he was just a stupid Xiaohua. What did stupid Xiaohua know? I turned around and met Lu Yu's gaze. Suddenly, I felt a bit embarrassed and smiled at him awkwardly. Lu Yu lowered his eyes and handed me a lollipop. I waved my hand and didn't accept his kindness. Otherwise, stupid Xiaohua would be angry again for no reason when we were about to part. I looked at Lu Yu and whispered, Lu Yu, I don't like cowards. He was stunned but said nothing when Qin Feng came to the door. I pinned him down and beat him up. Qin Feng didn't fight back after I vented my anger. I was tired and lay on the ground. Take revenge on me if you want anyway. I didn't lose by beating him up. He was in a sorry state. He looked at me and sneered. He didn't even call me that usual little one. In a sinister tone, Jingjia, you're such an idiot. As soon as he finished speaking, I quickly got up and punched him, and then beat him up again. He was furious and pinned me to the ground. I couldn't move, so I simply turned my head to one side. He sneered and scolded me. You don't distinguish right from wrong. I sneered. You're aiding the evildoers and abetting the tyrant. Qin Feng, listen to me. I nodded. Okay, I'll listen to your sophistry. Qin Feng looked a bit speechless and also a bit like he wanted to laugh. He opened his mouth, but before he could speak, his whole body flew out from on top of Mei He, completely lost his temper and cursed. Jingjia, are you and your pretty boy both crazy? Xiaohua growled at him. Looking extremely fierce, I quickly grabbed his hand and started to educate him. Xiaohua, this is not right. Next time you see him, you should use more strength. Qin Feng wanted to join the Spark base. According to him, he didn't want to work in the southern base anymore. Actually, I wasn't willing. Qin Feng was crazy and hard to serve, but the condition he offered was to improve the soil. His reward was enough food and zombies. I didn't refuse. Sufficient benefits made me temporarily forget the hatred. I was even already looking forward to the deliciousness of the vegetables. I thanked him in a good mood, and we talked politely to each other, not mentioning what had just happened at all. He had a way to transfer abilities, but still delayed for me for so long during that time. He also used instruments to enhance my ability. Otherwise, after falling off the city wall, I might have died. He really had good intentions. A smile appeared on Qin Feng's pale face. Finally, he reached out and touched my head. Then call me big brother and let me hear it. I felt a shudder of disgust. He glanced at Xiaohua, who was glaring at him, and quickly withdrew his hand. He said to me, you were cuter when you were a child. I didn't know where he got the nerve to mention the things from childhood. When he first moved into my house, I heard from my grandfather that he was a good-looking and well-mannered child. The image of a boy in a white shirt emerged in my mind, and the fact was almost the same as what I thought. Qin Feng was really deceptive in appearance during the time he first came. I was very attentive to bring him tea and water, calling him brother Qin Feng. At every turn he pretended to be gentle and polite, but then he dissected my cat at that time. I wanted to kill him. I cried and asked my grandfather to send him back, but he just pretended to be innocent. Thinking of this, and seeing that we had made peace, I could only sigh at the unpredictability of the world. There are no eternal enemies, only eternal interests. Lu Yu didn't develop according to the original plot. He directly led his people to take refuge in the Spark base. I was puzzled, and only said, Lu Yu, you don't have to do this for me. I vaguely guessed his feelings for me, but I couldn't remember the origin between us in my memory. I seemed to have always disliked Lu Yu and even secretly called him a little follower, so I simply asked, do you like me? Lu Yu lowered his head, his fingers trembling slightly. He clenched his fists, but didn't reply. He was in charge of training the people in the base every day. They all said he was cold-hearted and unfeeling. He was also fearless when killing zombies, but he was a coward. In the third year of the apocalypse, the Spark base was getting bigger and bigger, and its scale was almost like a small city. The city also began to operate gradually. It had a force that could compete with Lu Huai's base. When I received the signal from the contact person of the National Department, I finally got news of my grandfather. The old man had made military achievements when he was young and had been secretly protected by the relevant department. So, when the government department launched an activity to recruit ability users, I led the entire Spark force to join. Following the country is definitely the right thing to do. The first task the country assigned to me was to go to Lu Huai mountain. The moment I received the information, I only felt a pain in my heart. In the photo was a baby with its neck hanging by a chain. As the photos went on, the baby gradually grew up, and the chain around its neck also gradually became larger. The appearance of the teenager in the photos gradually coincided with stupid Xiao Hua. There were many photos, hundreds of them. I was breathing a bit rapidly. It was not until I saw the last page that I put away the information, feeling weak all over. My task was to bring back the information from Lu Huai mountain. After their extensive investigation, they found the source of the virus. I turned around and looked at the young man huddled on the sofa, watching DVD. My eyes were red, and I called out. He turned around in a daze and met my gaze. Seeing my slightly red eyes, his aura gradually became anxious. In just 2 seconds, he came to my side. I reached out to him until his cold body pressed against mine. He patted my back carefully. Imitating others, he babbled something, but I miraculously understood. He said, "Don't cry." He wasn't stupid Xiao Hua. He was just learning to be human for the first time. Xiao Hua and I packed our bags and went to Lu Huai mountain. Before we set off, Qin Feng also came along. Xiao Hua could already understand some words. He would nod or shake his head when I asked him something. The laboratory in Lu Huai mountain was very hidden. The laboratory had been damaged, but no one had been there. Xiao Hua showed obvious rejection of this place. He blocked me from entering. I touched his head. In less than 2 seconds, his aura softened. I found several USB drives and an experimental report. What I never expected was that this human catastrophe actually originated from human greed. A rich man who had founded a business empire didn't want to die. He paid a high salary to find someone to study the method of immortality. The person he found was a young man who was talented, but unrecognized. Money fueled his ambition. He wanted to make a scientific research achievement that would shock the world, so he took away his newly born child and locked him up in Lu Huai mountain. After coming back from Lu Huai mountain, I was always restless looking at Xiao Hua. The truth about his life was about to be revealed. I opened the USB drive. There were 3 video materials inside. In the video, the young man was injected with various potions. Every day the chains in the video rattled, and the young man wailed, making the most primitive sounds of pain, each sound shrill on the screen. The young man looked in pain, as if he wished he could tear himself apart. I seemed to understand why he had been unable to speak. I could hardly bear to watch. There was a dull pain in my chest, almost making me unable to breathe. I turned around and saw only Xiao Hua, who was standing obediently outside the glass door, waiting for me. When he saw me in pain, he suddenly became anxious, and his eyes were filled with anger. I waved my hand at him, and then he became quiet again. Qin Feng sneered and then said, "I originally thought it was a little wolf cub." The second video showed countless ordinary people being experimented on, men and women, old and young. It was like a living hell. In the last video, the young man forcefully tore off the restraint around his neck, killed that man, and rushed out like crazy. The video was dozens of minutes long. I fast forwarded to watch it leaning on the sofa. I felt weak all over. The door was pushed open forcefully. I saw Xiao Hua's eyes full of guilt and worry. I knew why he felt guilty. This was the first time he had disobeyed my words. Just because he saw me crying, he hugged me and carefully patted my back. His eyes fell on the playing video. His eyes widened. Finally, he slowly reached out and covered my eyes. He babbled something. He was very anxious and tried his best to speak. Finally, he could only purse his lips, looking extremely down. This was his first time learning to be human. I wouldn't call him stupid Xiao Hua anymore. I reached out and hugged him, gently touching his head. "I won't watch. It's all in the past." He patted my back, and I patted his back. We comforted each other. Qin Feng beside us. In the 5th year of the apocalypse, Qin Feng was recruited into the national laboratory. Damn it. Even if he was a madman, a genius was popular everywhere due to my powerful spiritual type ability. I was sent by the government to settle the zombies with permission. I established a zombie city as for the urban construction workers. Looking at the zombies working strenuously, I suddenly thought that this was probably the greatest use of my ability. Working was good. They had no time to fight and kill, and it also avoided being shot in the head. In the 6th year of the apocalypse, a group of people in the southern base, who were making a last-ditch resistance, were arrested. Such reactionaries, who tried to overthrow the government, were imprisoned. The leader was executed by shooting, and the rest were sentenced to life imprisonment. Before entering prison, Lu Huai was still shouting that he was a high-level ability user. I went to see him for the last time. His former glorious image was gone. The days of fleeing had made him down and out now. Seeing him, I suddenly felt nothing in my heart. I thought that in the original book, he finally overthrew the government and became the supreme king. I just felt a sense of pity. He opened his mouth, wanting to say something. Finally, he suddenly burst into laughter and told me something that happened a long time ago. "I never liked you at all. If it weren't for your grandfather, I wouldn't have been willing to be with you and Lu Yu. He always likes to snatch things from me. You were the only time I ever won against him." Lu Huai had always been a very proud person. Now, covering his eyes, he was crying and laughing at the same time. "Poor him. That coward. He didn't even dare to give you a gift. He made a wedding dress for me in vain." I nodded. "I see." His eyes were red. "Don't you feel angry? Don't you want to kill me? Have you loved the wrong person all these years?" I shook my head and said seriously, "I won't kill you. And I don't feel angry. When you handed me over to Qin Feng and wanted to take away my ability, I actually already guessed it. I really liked you at that time. Not because of the things Lu Yu gave me. Those things just made me think that you liked me too. If I had known they were from Lu Yu, maybe I wouldn't have accepted them. I looked at him and finally said, "The first time I saw you, you were doing your homework upstairs. The certificates of merit covered the whole wall. Had heard my grandfather talk about you a long time ago. He said you were the smartest child in the yard later. On the way home from school once, you drove away the bad guys who were bullying me that time. I thought you were a big hero." Big hero. Haha, big hero. Lu Huai looked up to the sky and laughed. When I turned to leave, Lu Huai's voice was hoarse. "If at that time, I hadn't wanted to take away your ability, would you have helped me?" I shook my head and told him seriously, "I have always been making the decisions that I think are right." In the book, before Lu Huai became the new king, there were countless white bones piled up beneath him. I wouldn't be that kind of person. When I finally left, he whispered, "Thank you." Xiaohua held my hand, and his mood was a bit low. He was counting with his hands behind his back. I thought carefully, and then belatedly realized he was counting how many words I had spoken with Lu Huai. Alas, stupid Xiaohua was still stupid Xiaohua. With such strange reasons for getting angry, I touched Xiaohua's head. Forget it. Forget it. I'd better coax him first. Ruan Yin was pregnant after giving birth. She had been doing hard labor in the women's prison. She had always wanted to see me. But in the end, I still didn't go to see her. I'm not a magnanimous person. I won't ignore the harm. I said I wouldn't protect her anymore. After the zombie city was built, Xiaohua and I moved in. Although ability users have a longer lifespan than ordinary people, they will eventually die. Xiaohua and I walked through the spring, summer, autumn, and winter together in the entire zombie empire. There were only the two of us. I felt that I was getting older and older. In just 10 years, I had become a white-haired old lady. This was the side effect of the spiritual type ability indeed. There was no such thing as a free lunch. The outside world had already started to be rebuilt. Every time Xiaohua and I went out of the city gate, someone would say that it was a grandson accompanying his grandmother for a walk. Perhaps I was really old. I started to be nitpicky and seriously corrected them. "No, it's not a grandmother and grandson. He is my lover." Even until now, I still can't tell whether I love stupid Xiaohua later. I didn't like going to the outside world anymore. I let Xiaohua carry me to the highest point of the zombie city to watch the sunset. I also didn't like taking pictures. It seemed that in this way, I could avoid knowing the fact that I was an old lady. Xiaohua still looked like he was 17 or 18 years old when we first met, but stupid Xiaohua was no longer stupid Xiaohua. He still couldn't speak. His greatest pleasure was watching those melodramatic love movies in the DVD player, but he learned more and more things. He had been learning to love me in the way of humans. He would hold my hand and walk with our fingers intertwined like all old couples. He would look at me with his gray eyes, pleading with me to watch that melodramatic TV series with him again and again. He never seemed to get tired of it. Later, I became even older. I had to wear glasses to see Xiaohua clearly. I started to worry all night long. My Xiaohua was so stupid. What would he do if I died? Later, when I felt that I was going to die, Xiaohua accompanied me day and night. That day, he babbled and finally uttered the words, "I love you." I slowly closed my eyes. Stupid Xiaohua was still stupid Xiaohua after learning for so long. He had only learned one sentence. I said to him, "Be happy even without me." He nodded, and then I felt relieved. I used my ability one last time to make all the zombies in the city fall asleep. This was the last thing I could do for stupid Xiaohua. Since the zombies were no longer a threat, they wouldn't hurt Xiaohua. He was too stupid. If he couldn't survive in the zombie city, he would definitely still stay there. He was too obedient. I was actually a bit reluctant, but I didn't have time to tell him before I died. I thought this was a sad story. On the day when the first marshal passed away, the young man who had always been by her side and never grew old carried the marshal to the highest place of the castle and caught the last sunset. Many people who knew the inside story said that it was because the marshal loved to watch the sun here. During her lifetime, the beautiful young man kissed the marshal's lips under the setting sun glow. He reached out and took out his own heart and then closed his eyes for a long time in the setting sun. They leaned against each other after the death. As General Lu indicated, the two of them were buried together in Lu Huai Mountain, the source of evil. Soon after, the bombs under the zombie city began to explode. They exploded for 3 days, and the zombie city was razed to the ground. And that General Lu, not long after the marshal died, also fell asleep forever underground. Extra story of Lu. I liked her very early on. She had long hair, a hot temper, and an extremely soft-hearted nature. She loved to wear red dresses. She said she looked good in red. How should I describe her? She was the sun during my gloomy life when I was called a bastard for more than 10 years. She was that little sun. Her eyes looking at me were bright. She didn't laugh at my status as a bastard, but then one day, she changed and started to distance herself from me. She didn't like me because of Lu Huai. Actually, I didn't quite understand either. Clearly, he had everything: his parents' love and his grandfather's attention, yet he still wanted to take her away. I was used to following behind her, doing the homework she hadn't finished, and buying her favorite snacks. The thing I did the most was to hide behind her and secretly watch her ponytail flutter in the air and watch her bright smile when talking and laughing with her classmates. I followed behind her, waiting for her to turn around and call me little follower. When she said this, she wasn't really angry. She just had a faint look of confusion. And then she started to imagine things on her own and asked me if I was a road idiot. I was a bit nervous, and my face turned red somehow. I nodded. She smiled with her eyes curved. Finally, she laughed loudly and said, "Are you stupid? You don't even know the way." She raised her chin. "Then you follow me, but don't get too close to me." She looked around, being very careful, for fear of being seen by Lu Huai. I found it funny and sad later. She also took me to take the boosie. Pretended not to know how. She said helplessly, "You're such an idiot." Then she patiently and painstakingly started to teach me. She was very lazy. Every time she did her homework, she would fall asleep, with her little face flushed. The setting Sun rays shone on her face through the glass, and her soft long hair spread on her back, making her look extremely gentle. I finished her homework for her. But she still didn't wake up later. I secretly kissed her cheek. This was the closest I had ever been to her. The next second, I looked up and met Lu Huai's cold eyes. Oh no, this was the first thought in my mind. Later, many times, she thought those things were done by Lu Huai for her. For example, she casually said that she wanted to eat takoyaki. I remember that day the sun was very strong. I ran for a long time before I found the food street she mentioned later. On her birthday, I gave her a dress that I had carefully prepared for a long time. The dress was very beautiful and very suitable for her, but she didn't like it because Lu Huai said he didn't like me. So when she saw the words Lu Yu on the dress, she chose to throw it in the trash. Even though I could tell that she really liked the dress. Later, the apocalypse came. Lu Huai established an ability user group. She didn't awaken her ability, but she was stronger than ordinary people. The zombie crystal nuclei that ability users got, she would also get the same amount even if she didn't sleep. I felt sorry for her. Every time I killed zombies, I would put 2 crystal nuclei in her pocket. Then I would see her smile shyly at Lu Huai. At this time, a rare shyness of a young girl would appear on her face and that person who bullied her. I also taught him a lesson for her. I kicked that person into the pile of zombies and watched indifferently as that person was submerged by the zombies. When looking for supplies, I was used to hiding her favorite small cakes for her. But on the note I sent, the character Yu was changed and changed again, and then changed back to Lu. I always remembered the disgusted look in her eyes when she saw that dress. Sometimes I didn't know whether to blame my cowardice or the cowardice of the thief. Later, one day, she told me that she didn't like cowards. Her eyes were clear and bright, as if she could see through all my thoughts. Her ability was a powerful spiritual type ability. This was something I only found out later. At that time, she had been missing for a long time. I looked for her for a long time, but couldn't find her. I always thought that she might have encountered danger and turned into a zombie in the end. I was even muddle-headed and thought that I might as well go with her, but I never expected that they would use her for experiments. The experiment was successful, but she also went crazy when she ran out of the laboratory. I could hardly believe that it was a person. Later, she jumped off the city wall in a crazy state. They all said that Jing Jie did it voluntarily, only I knew that it wasn't true. She was such a proud person. She would never do such a thing. I searched for a long time at the place where she jumped and finally found her bones. Later, I went to Qin Feng and begged him to keep her bones for me. Hated myself. Why was I always not by her side at the crucial moment? I was so angry that I wanted to die, but I couldn't die. I had to avenge her. But later, I still didn't succeed. It was my fault. I had schemed to live for so long, but still couldn't avenge her. It was really strange. I always seemed to be no match for Lu Huai. I changed her into the red dress she liked and jumped off the place where she died. The wind was blowing loudly in my ears. I whispered to the person in my arms, "I'm sorry, I love you." When I woke up, I saw the bustling street, as if I had returned to before the apocalypse. Suddenly, the memories of this body came to my mind, different from the previous life. She was still alive and had become a very outstanding person. I walked towards the zombie city they mentioned before I reached it. I only heard someone beating a drum and wailing at the city gate. I looked up and saw the scene of 2 people leaning against each other in the setting sun from a distance. This time, I seemed to be a little late again. It's my fault. This coward, I seem to have never told her that actually, in our previous life, we were together. She was wearing a beautiful red dress and was extremely beautiful. I closed my eyes, hoping that next time, I could come back earlier, much earlier, so that I would definitely be a little braver, not be the coward she doesn't like. I didn't dare to touch the sun during my lifetime. I could only glimpse a bit of moonlight at night.